was for daily updates so now I will share na message house and any day can I share but more than subscribe to channel na feel like video no share ma obi so ensanka video ni bi na fi wa dwenche so betim dia ba comment box ni me bejebre na kind amount na me saka information bi a say 4 seats a parliament declare vacant ni de emu 3 NDC edi kan fadada say no akoye enije pa o NDC camp na ehwe Agona West honum say information a ba say NDC afa and say ko Suhum so no de say NDC afa ne hands down kra say NPP mbe o bia and baako Amenfi Central honum na asa akoye twema mentwe kakra maame Juan Kujo ene papaya or the or co as independent candidate no ebuza for me mamikasa wan yenko hwe information a free sa enkomotwetwe mu buy na ba de obi e de beto so me ma renfi so be subscribe to channel no come on hwe video this here.
Kesi Tv Be proposal like he's called. There's Prince K. B0ws who is contesting for the NDC. Then there's the independent candidate Kojo Asante, who is the current member of parliament, who was the one who got 34,049 votes. And when we compared this figure to the previous 2016, he had increased the numbers of the NPP in the Suhum constituency. And so that tells you that, look, he's a formidable candidate. And it took him a while to declare his intention to contest as an independent candidate. Like many politicians do many at times when elections don't go their way. He said he was waiting and listening to the grassroots, and the calls were too loud. And so he decided to throw his hat into the race. So he's coming in. And so the question again that we asked for the other ones is that if the NPP candidate does around this, and you have Kojo Asante coming in and even crossing 15,000, or is he going to be able to get a 30,000 range that he got? The people of Suhum love him enough. Protozwa is a staffer at the presidency. And many accusations were made about issues of illegal mining. They had also talked about the fact that, look, they felt that the powers that be at the Jubilee House were solidly behind him, and that is what took Kojo Asante out of that parliamentary primary and resulted in his defeat. All those are matters that the party unfortunately could not resolve in a timely manner. He's been deemed to be doing business with the NPP in parliament, but on the ticket, this is how it looks, and he'll be joining them as well. And so it comes back to whether these numbers are anything to go by and whether it will have any implications.
It brings to mind the Fomena constituency conversation again, where someone from within the fold of the NPP has decided to go independent because of unresolved primary issues. And he clearly, from everything he has said, the interviews he's granted, show that he has been outmuscled by Protozwa or Kesi Tv Be, who has the institution backing him. So he is actually aggrieved. And again, political parties are unable to resolve some of these things properly or in time for major elections. So it looks like, based on how the seat has voted in time past, it could be a safe seat for the NPP. Look at the NDC's numbers. Even after the NDC held their primaries and settled on Prince K. B0ws, the NDC members in the constituency started raising concerns that their gentleman or their candidate had disappeared. In fact, there were stories about he going missing. And it was on the back of the fact that he is actually a resident out of the country. So he, right after the primaries, he traveled out, and they believed that he was going to try and get some funding to come and push his campaign. So within that period of his absence, the party people were concerned that they couldn't find him, and it was affecting mobilization and campaign activities. Well, we do know that he's back, but as to whether or not he actually has the entire backing of the NDC to at least sustain the 19,000 or increase it is a different conversation. And also on the back of the fact that the person he contested with, and we're talking about the NDC candidate, the person he contested with actually still has some backing within the fold of the NDC. So immediately he wasn't seen around for about a week or two. That candidate was being projected more or less. But of course, electorally, this is the man that had been elected. So the NDC had no option than to back him. If he is to undo the potential win of the NPP, then he needs to claw way past 25,000. Then it means that this difference is what he also needs to, or the NDC needs to capitalize on, try as much as possible to even half this and add to their numbers, and then we can actually have a two-horse race.
I mean, I think the point needs to be made strongly that it's important for political parties to make their internal processes as democratic as possible. Because if you simply look at the trend and say that it's a safe seat for our party, we go back to Fomena, and Fomena will tell you that you can't downplay that. But I agree with you perfectly on the fact that he needs to do a bit better. But the advantage that he gets going into the race is the fact that he is going to naturally get votes from the NDC. So the NDC, if the NDC is generally doing around this figure, because of the increase in the voter population in that area generally and everything, he can simply go a little above the 19,000. Now the danger is this difference here. If the MPP's current member of parliament, if he just manages to claw anything from within this range, and if he is in within the 10,000 range, that makes it very dangerous for the fortunes of the MPP. And so it comes down to the point about how important it is always that you just don't want to be in this situation. And I keep on saying that with what happened with the 137, it was very important that the parties ran their primaries in a manner that was credible or at least satisfactory to even people who are peeved with the outcome, so that some of these things do not happen. Yeah, so it's going to be a very keenly contested constituency there at Suhum. The NDC has, or probably is, you can say it probably is for the NDC to lose, because the NPP is currently split between the incumbent and another individual contesting on the ticket of the NPP. All right, our final constituency we are looking at out of the 4 that were declared vacant and reversed is the Agona West constituency. It's an interesting conversation here because it is, you can't say it is an all clear for the NPP. Why so? If you look at the numbers, the number of times the NPP has won, 5 times. The NDC has won it twice. 96, of course, under former President Rawlings in the early days of our democracy, so people didn't really know what was happening. They preferred NDC at the time. But over time, the conversation has changed. Now we have the NDC also winning in 2012. And in 2012, the key pointer is that that was when former President John Evans Atta-Mills had died, and there was a natural, sympathy vote that supported the NDC candidate then. So presidential-wise, the NDC won that election in that constituency as well. But for the parliamentary, when the NDC won, the margin wasn't that big. But let's look at why it is under contention. There is an issue within the fold of the NPP. Why is there an issue in the fold of the NPP? I mean, you have a former minister, Cynthia Morrison, is a former gender minister. She's contesting as an independent candidate. And so coming up against Paul Ofori Amwa. So this was the 2020 results actually, and this is how it looked. So she was able to grab the seat, getting 30,513. Then you have the NDC candidate getting a little 27,673. Then you have the independent candidate getting about 1,000 votes. Now, the difference was 2,840. The challenge really is going into the 2024 contest. So just like the other 3 that we've discussed, the NPP has a candidate there, Christopher Arthur, there's Cynthia Morrison, then the NDC is bringing Ernestina Ofori-Dangbe. It's been a contentious race, one of fights. You recall the gunshot, that incident that happened. The story is that some persons belonging to both sides, the NPP and the independent candidate, clashed. Gunshots were fired. We don't know which side fired the gunshots or whatever it is. But that smells of an internal implosion that is happening, because these 2 individuals are typically NPP people. And they know themselves as well. They know themselves as well. But due to internal disagreement and not being happy with the outcome of the elections, Cynthia Morrison is going as an independent candidate. And when they were doing the press conferences with this whole thing happening in Parliament, she was with Afenya Makin and co. And I think that Cynthia Morrison, I mean, as an observer from afar, I get the feeling Cynthia Morrison is confusing her voters. Are you breaking away from the party, or you are actually with the party? The fact that you say you are going independent doesn't mean that you can still do business with the party. You should clearly define those lines. And unfortunately, that is where people still keep going back to the declaration of the speaker and why they thought that should have stood. The Supreme Court's decision now even brings further confusion to electorates, especially when you have Cynthia Morrison doing business with the MPP, still going to meet the leadership. And I get the feeling that she thought that she needs their backing to win the seat. But they cannot come and back you openly when they also have a candidate in the race. So there's going to be the Fomena issue likely to play out. I mean, the only advantage for Cynthia Morrison, for Kojo Asante, I think there's an advantage that a lot of us maybe we are not looking at yet, is the fact that if they win as independent candidates, it shouldn't be too difficult for them to continue to do business with the NPP.
Okay.
Because of how they've conducted themselves around this time. Because unlike the Fomena situation as well, the president hasn't said he can't work with Cynthia Morrison.
I think the president has advised himself.
Yes, I mean, and it will be interesting to see if Dr. Bawumia goes to that constituency, what the message there will be. Because obviously he will be lifting the hand of Christopher Atta and not Cynthia Morrison.
Yes.
And there's the potential that she can win the seat as well. And so it's very dangerous for the NPP over here. The same thing with the Suhum situation as well. And it comes back to the same point that, well, what is going to happen here? Will it go in favor of the NDC? Because what the NDC would need is that they have to keep their performance or improve it and hope that this difference is clawed and some taken from this 30,000, which will be improving, I mean, because of the voter population.
Yeah.
Some is taken from the NPP candidates. Then they will say that, well, NSC could stand a chance of picking up that particular constituency.
And again, it stands to reason why Cynthia thinks she has to run again. One, she won convincingly. Secondly, she became a minister. And one, you can also agree that or assume that she has enough financial muscle or resources to go again and had done things in the constituency for which she believes the people should have naturally given her another term. But you know, politics is very dynamic. Probably while you were a minister in Accra trying to do government business, someone else was doing business behind you in the constituency. So it's a major challenge for her. She just couldn't come to terms with the fact that a constituency she thought she had won convincingly for the party is breaking or is pushing her out during the primaries. So it's actually an issue she's dealt with. Unfortunately, they are unable to resolve it, and as we stand, she's going independent. As to how much damage she'll do to the NPP candidate, we are unable to tell. Unfortunately, again, for the NDC, they've changed their candidate. You would have thought that based on the numbers the NDC got, 27,000 is substantial in a total vote of, let's say, 80,000. 27,000 is quite substantial. It's not too far from what the NPP candidate got. So if NDC was minded, beg your pardon, it's NPP, NDC keeps confusing. But if the NDC was minded, they could have at least either kept the candidate, unless the candidate says he or she wouldn't attempt again. They could have at least kept that candidate and do a bit more. Then the current confusion between the NPP could have helped the NDC somewhat.
I mean, there's some arrogance with the two main political parties. It's they keep on looking at the numbers and they make the point that, look, anyways, we already start around this figure. That is what keeps on playing in their minds. So it's just like even the presidential elections. The two main parties, they are going to get more than 45% anyways. And so if they don't think that it's necessarily a candidate. So if you are not getting the seat for them, sometimes they would want to simply change you and try someone else. But I mean, I agree with you because of now the potential of having a repeat two candidates from the same party taking place. Maybe sticking to the same candidate could have helped their chances. One will also make the argument that, well, it's also a fresh face with some form of new energy that is coming in there. And the central region, for generally how that particular region behaves, even though the Agona West generally is slightly an advantage for the NPP, the NDC can maybe run into it. So the work largely is on the NPP. They have a lot of work to do in the Agona West to ensure that Christopher Atta retains the seat of Cynthia Morrison, who is contesting independent, but is still in parliament. He cannot do business with an independent member.
It's shocking, right? That the president will go to the constituency to say that he cannot work with an independent.
And that notwithstanding. So, I mean, a lot of people will say he's a proper party man.
Yes.
Because that notwithstanding, he put the interest of the NPP above his personal disagreement with the president and the governing Patriotic Party for that matter. Went back into their fold, worked with them, was second deputy speaker, has now gone in and is going to represent them in the party. I do not see much of a problem happening with Fomena if you compare to the other areas.
And it also tells you that you cannot discount the intelligence of the electorate. The electorate knew who they wanted to vote for. Or a few days ago on the show, we discussed how national politics is totally different from parliamentary politics or parliamentary elections. For parliamentary, a number of people in the last elections voted skirt and blouse because the dynamics are totally different from the national one. Here, it could also stem from the fact that this man, because he was an indigene of the area, people knew him beyond political lines. So there is a likelihood that there were even people who are NDC or of other political lineage that voted for him because of the personal relationship or the fact that he was one of them, a home person. So like we indicated, it is straightforward, likely that he's returning to Parliament, and the NPP had to find ways of reasoning with him by even giving him the position he holds in Parliament. It probably was one of the baits they threw to get him to work or caucus with them in Parliament. So that's what's happening in the Fomena constituency. It's one of the 4 we are discussing, the 4 that were declared vacant. Now that decision has been reversed. And from Fomena, we're going to one other that is very key in terms of the bones of contention and how both the NDC and the NPP need to work. Otherwise, if still things stand as they are, the NPP is likely to lose 2 of their seats, or currently they are within their fold, but if the elections are anything to go by, that these 2 people are going independent. If they do go and move with the numbers, and we'll show you the numbers, they go with the numbers that they won with, there's a likelihood it could affect the numbers of the NPP in Parliament for the 9th Parliament. But before we do the NPP, let's go to Amenfi Central. What's happening in Amenfi Central?
Amenfi is very similar to Fomena, but I think your only disagreements will be on the strength of the candidates involved potentially, whether Peter Kwachiaka will be as strong as you had Andrea Mwakwesiama being. The similarity I make the point about is the fact that this is also the stronghold of the NDC, like the way Fomena is the stronghold of the NPP. Amenfi Central is a stronghold of the NDC. So you've seen the presidential results since 1996. The NDC has won 7 times. The NPP is yet to win there. For the 2020 parliamentary results, for instance, you saw the NDC winning with a difference of 4,174. And so it's not, someone will look at it and say, well, it's not too wide a gap. But the context really is that the NDC tends to do very well. Now, the challenge for the NDC is that their front is divided at this particular level here because there's Joanna Jan Kujo, who is the NDC's candidate. In the previous discussions that we had, we had put a question mark. She's now on the ballot now. They've gotten the call to set aside that injunction. Then there is Patrick Hodgson Ampontin, who is the MPP candidate, also the DCE for Wasa Amenfi Central District. Then there is Peter Kwachiaka, the current member of parliament, who is contesting as an independent candidate. And so the question many are asking is, look, the difference of 4,000 that we have here, if Kwachiaka picks up, say, 6,000 of those votes, is he picking the 6,000 from here or is picking from here? There are those who say that, look, he's an NDC man. He's going to pick most likely from here because he was on the ballot in 2020 anyways, and they gave him 26,000. So the thinking is that if he does anywhere around 5,000 to 6,000, then potentially Joanna Kujojan is in danger.
And that is if all things remains constant and the NPP still give at least above 20,000 to their candidate.
Absolutely. And so then that becomes an issue of, well, what will happen there? But what many are also looking out and saying is that, look, she is a strong candidate because she was disqualified. And we all saw people protesting in the area. We all saw individuals going on the street and saying that, look, we have to have her back in the election because of how crucial they considered her to be in that area. Peter Kwachiaka, interestingly, had a similar posturing like the Fomena member of parliament when this whole vacant seat Buhara started. I mean, he stated quite clearly that he didn't have any problem if the NDC was unable to get a candidate onto the ballot. He didn't mind doing business with them and even helping them win the seat, even though he was contesting as an independent candidate. I don't know whether you think we could have Fomena play out and Peter Kwachiaka grabbing the seat, but I think it will certainly come down to how well the NDC is able to improve its numbers. If the MPP is able to still keep its performance within this range, then if Kwachiaka just crosses the 4,000 range, then Joanna Kujo potentially could be in trouble.
Yeah, and then again, it's also quite surprising to note that in the constituency, it was the first